Hello and welcome. My name is Deirdre Harris Kelly, and I'm one of the co-directors of the Your Bearden Foundation. And on behalf of our other director, Joanne Bryant Reed, and the Board of Trustees, I want to welcome you to another edition of Tell Your Bearden Story. This is a series of the Foundation's oral history project that aims to highlight real encounters of Bearden's friends and family. These stories illuminate new perspectives and round out what scholars and researchers often miss about histories. We are currently undergoing a major catalog raisonné project, as many of you know, and we're soliciting as much information from dealers and collectors on their experiences with the artist and his artworks. Our partner for the catalog raisonné is the Wildenstein-Platner Institute, who will publish the catalog online. They are also beginning to conduct oral histories and information, and you can access this on their website at wpiart.com. And that will be in the chat later on if you want to get more information on the other programs that they're doing and the oral history project. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, the Your Bearden Foundation is the nonprofit organization that perpetuates the artistic and intellectual legacies of the great 20th century master of visual art. We are proud partners with the Harlem Cultural Collaborative, and we thank Harlem One Stop for their support. This program is also in part sponsored by the Claire Elizabeth Jackson Carter Foundation. So I want to introduce our wonderful guest for this evening, who is Peg Alston. Peg, as many of you may know her, she is a private dealer, and she's also had a long history of establishing and promoting African-American artists. And she specializes in African-American artists of African descent, and also many gifted emerging artists and mid-career artists. Some of the works that she's sold are from artists that we consider the Black masters: Aaron Douglas, William H. Johnson, Laura Waring, okay, Horace Pippin, Charles White, and Elizabeth Catlett. She also has sold and promoted the works of Sam Gilliam, rest in peace, Richard Yard, Betty Saar, Howardina Pindell, Frank Bowling, William T. Williams, and Ed Clark. So I won't go on and on about that because we're going to let Peg tell us a little bit more, and we put it all in our promotions. So if you need to read that, please refer to our website and our Facebook for those names. The list is long, and so we'll pepper them through our talk this evening. But Peg Alston has been around since the 70s and all throughout the 80s, which was such an important period for many of these artists, and in particular for Your Bearden. So Peg is joining us. I just also want to say that Peg has had a special dedication to educating the public through lectures and activism, and she's played a pivotal role in cultivating an interest around the country for investing in African-American art. So we can talk a little bit more about that too. Long active with the Studio Museum and many major New York City cultural institutions. Peg Alston has also organized seminars on collecting, appraising, and cataloging African-American art. So we'll hear more about that, but without further ado, I want to welcome Peg to our stage. Thank you so much, Peg. You've been around for a long time. You've been a constant on the scene since I've been around. So I'm really happy that you could take the time to talk with us tonight and just tell us your experience. So obviously we invited you here to talk about Bearden, the man, the artist, the leader. And you knew that you knew many of the artists that were living and working in New York City throughout that period. But first I want to start with you just telling us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing currently.
Currently, I am just continuing with showing new artists, established artists. I mean, the work is not completed. I just wanted to, and still continue to want to, get people to understand how enjoyable it is to be around art. Uh, Regardless of who the artist is, it's a very personal experience. I have tried to have in my stable artists who I feel are worth considering, artists who are going to continue to work no matter what. It's their raison d'etre. They're not here to please anyone. They first want to please themselves, and they are creating from their gut. So it's an ongoing situation. And at the bottom, as I say, the foundation of it all is to let people know that it's another art is another form of enjoyment. Simple as that. As much as we enjoy music, art falls into the same category.
Right, Pat. Peg, and I just wanted to show your fine arts website, little sample there, and tell us a little bit about this business as a business.
As a business, it has always, but the website is just, a few images of artists. Now I noticed that I have, because I haven't looked at it in a while, but they're already in the center. There are 3 works by Romare Bearden.
Yes.
There's a drawing on the left, a line drawing, but still, very powerful. Below that is a city scene, but in wash, that really is similar to many of his city collages, but this was all done by hand. So for people who think that Bearden only did collage,
Yes.
you can see from his hand that he was very, very skilled
Yes.
in drawing and painting. The work above, which shows a map of Africa, was a commission. He was commissioned to do this. I think it's for a school. This is just the study for it.
Yes.
And this piece I gave to the Museum of African Art and Culture, the new museum in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad you did that.
Well,
that's what we need.
I really want to first congratulate the Bearden Foundation and what you have done, what you are, because Bearden deserves to be in the limelight always. And we'll talk later about his many, many contributions.
Yes.
Yeah. And, he was and is very, very important. A lot of younger people don't realize that. And I think we need to keep him in the forefront because he really, I call him the Picasso of 20th century African-American artists.
Why do you call him that? Is it because of the many different ways that he worked, as Picasso had his different periods, or the popularity?
The importance of Romare Bearden. People may not realize how much he contributed to helping to younger artists through Cinque Gallery.
Yeah.
He, I think, was the spearheader for Spiral, an organization of Black artists, Hale Woodruff, Norman Lewis, so many because in the 60s and 70s, many African-American artists were not represented by galleries. And that was by, this was the choice of the art market. Had nothing to do with the quality of the Black artists. If they were, it was almost as if the art world wanted to keep the Black artists out. And yet the artists continued to create. And Bearden, because he was one of the few, there was Jacob Lawrence, who were represented by major galleries. He realized the need to also help other artists. And, he did it just with such ease. He didn't just enjoy his fame, and he did. In our community, he was an icon. We looked up to him. And he never said no. That might have been his downfall because, he had so much, everyone was after him. Like that drawing on the website was really a series of drawings that he was asked to do for a book of poetry with African poets, and the drawings were by him. And so each of the drawings is titled after a particular African poet. I don't think it, ended in a book, but he was asked to do that, and he did. But Cinque Gallery was very important for younger artists, and he promoted them in that way. It was a nonprofit organization. I think first he started at the Public Theater, Joseph Papp, and then he moved across, the space moved across the street. When I met him, and he knew what I was attempting to do, which was to create a market among Blacks, because that did not exist. Without my asking for his help, he did whatever he could. And one of those things was to hire me for Cinque Gallery. He even thought that the art was, that he felt that if the galleries knew about these many artists, he felt that he was very optimistic at a very early period. So he thought with their knowledge that they would embrace a Black artist as they would any other artist, but that did not occur. Nevertheless, it was Cinque continued for years and was a site where artists could show their works. Mel Edwards was one of the artists.
Yeah, we definitely appreciated the legacy and history of Cinque. And we have done some work, our program, one of our major educational programs of Artist Talks is named after Cinque Gallery. It isn't the kind of space that people can come to the way that they came to Cinque, but it is a place where we promote artists, mid-career artists who aren't getting a lot of attention, and we try to give them a platform. So that usually results in some artist talks or panels. We even had a panel, a live panel, and back in the day, before COVID, where we brought together folks who had exhibited at Cinque. And then more recently, they had an exhibition at the Art Students League, and Susan Stedman.
Oh, that's right.
That's right. She brought them together. So we are very much aware of the legacy and how important that is. So you were saying you first met Bearden. So how did you, though, get into the arts, and how did you end up in New York trying to make that happen?
Yes. Well, we'll try to squeeze it all in a short period of time, but I came to attend NYU. lived in the dormitory, was introduced to art through a woman that I babysat for, and we have remained friends. But in her apartment was all of these original works. Jackson Pollock, Leger, no Black artists, but Albers, Mondrian, and the art just spoke to me. And I remember I had no idea it was going to end up being an art dealer. I was interested in art for my apartment. I said, when I got out of college, I wanted art, but I saw the beauty of originals. And at that point, I'm not certain I could have named one Black artist, but I knew that they existed. And it didn't matter that they might be unknown, but the richness of originals. As a matter of fact, most of the things in her apartment were abstract. And I said, gee, maybe I could do a work myself. It looks so easy. So I met an artist named Earl Miller, who turned out to be, later he was a member of Spiral as well. And he let me, because I had this just, wish to get into a studio. And I said, gee, I could do something and put it in a frame. Well, he provided the paints and the paper in his studio. And I think I worked at it for 2 minutes, put the paints down, never to pick up again, because I realized how difficult it was. But I did continue to buy at my first job when I graduated from undergrad at NYU was a painting by Earl Miller. And I paid in installments. It was only $60. I think I paid $10 a week.
And did you buy it directly from the artist?
Because artists didn't have, gallery representation, at that time. So anyway, that was my first, and I continued buying what I could. I worked as a social worker. I went on to Columbia for a master's in social work, but it was just a job. And I remember once saying, and I realized none of my friends or colleagues were interested in art. And I remember, gee, it'd be nice to work at something that I loved. And I knew what it would be to work in art. And if a market didn't exist. So I did my, tried as shy. I was very shy, believe it or not, but I knew I had to get over that in order to try to convince people and open up and try to develop their interest in art.
So what did that mean when you say that you wanted to develop the market? And so you were meeting artists, did it occur to you to have a gallery? What did that mean? Talking to artists, promoting their careers, trying to get shows to happen? What were the activities that you thought?
It was really little by little. First, number one, I also knew that just because our artists were not known did not mean that they were unimportant. And also that if we relied on outsiders to accept us, when was that going to happen? And I realized that if a market didn't exist among Blacks because it was a part of our culture, it had to be created. And I did, my first husband, we went to the Museum of Modern Art at the opening. I don't know how we got invited, but Bearden's opening at Museum of Modern Art. All of his work, city scenes, some of them were even three-dimensional. And so also through Earl Miller, we went to a show at Spiral, which was on Christopher Street. And
Right.
this was a group show with Norman Lewis, Hale Woodruff, Rick Mayhew. And my husband even noticed Bearden. Bearden was an unknown at that time. And he said, gee, I like this artist's work. And my friend,
Wow.
well, let's get it, and it was $250. Here's,
Yes. By the way, Peg, I wanted to just ask you, we had a question about the artwork in the background right now while we're speaking.
okay. On my right, which would probably be your left, is a work by Jack White, who is no longer with us, but an extraordinary artist. And then is an artist who I'm not certain a lot of people know about. His name is Leslie Smith, and Leslie Smith III. And when I saw his work a few years ago, I just gravitated to it and sold a few things, even though he's represented by a gallery based outside of New York. But it's unshaped canvases, or canvases that are not rectangular or square. And then to my left, your right, is a partial viewing of a painting, oil and paper by Norman Lewis. Then on my right, your left, is a piece of African sculpture, which is also a love of mine. And
Yes.
my first show was African sculpture. And I continue to collect it and try to get people interested, because Cubism, speaking about Picasso, Cubism sprung from African sculpture.
Right.
Picasso had mats in his studio, and it really influenced his style. I mean, I remember once reading autobiography by Gertrude Stein, who had a studio, well, it was a salon in Paris, even though she was American, but she and her brother entertained a lot of up and coming artists, and one of them was Picasso. But Picasso apparently at one point mentioned that, and they called African sculpture Black art. Black art influenced him. And she stated in this book that Picasso said that he was influenced by Black art. There's no way this occurred. I think I closed that book never to open it up again. But there was a show, Primitivism versus 20th Century Art, at Museum of Modern Art, 25 years ago, which I think was the first time the art world admitted to African sculpture and their influence on artists like Picasso, Braque. And they would have, in the show, there would be a mask, and then the painting, for instance, by Picasso, Damoiselle d'Avignon, where the faces were more like sculptural, and they had the exact sculpture that he took, that, the face.
Yeah.
He created that face. Bearden was at that opening, actually. And Bearden even said to me, he said, all these years I thought Picasso was influenced by African sculpture. He wasn't influenced by it, he copied it. But anyway, so much for, I think, Picasso inadvertently contributed through his influence of African sculpture, and Cubism, abstract art, sprung from African sculpture.
Yes, and many of the modernists were looking at African sculpture, no doubt. They admit it. One of the things I wanted to, we were talking about, well, you were talking about being at an opening and spotting Bearden and talking with him. I want to show this next slide.
I did not speak. Okay, I didn't speak with him because he wasn't at that. It wasn't at the opening. So,
okay, yeah. But you were at the opening in 1971.
I was
and
at the,
if
no,
you
I didn't go to the opening. Oh, 1971.
MoMA. You said the one at MoMA, the Bearden exhibition at MoMA. The
yeah,
retrospective.
71. It was 71. Wow.
That was 71.
Yes. Yes.
And I just want to show, I mean, I'm just thinking about the milieu, what it was like being at some of these openings. And you gave us a picture, this group picture at a Jacob Lawrence opening. And I just want you to talk about it. I named who I could recognize,
yes.
But I hoped maybe you could,
right.
You know, shine some light on who. Can we spotlight that alone? Nadel, can we just see a little bigger picture of that picture? Yeah, right.
That was an exciting exhibit because it was the first time there were so many Blacks at an opening. I mean, it was a first in many ways. And
do you know what year this was? Do you remember?
1974.
All right, great.
So there's Raymond Saunders standing next to me on the right. There's also
you're second from the right, correct?
No, the guy in the white suit and the hat.
Yes.
A light suit. That's Raymond Saunders.
Yes. Yes.
And that's me standing next to him. And I was trying because that hat was pushing me out of the way.
Uh-huh.
But also Bob Blackburn on his knees in the front, right?
Yes, I got him. Yeah.
You see Ed Clark. And between them, I just can't think of his name right now.
Benny Andrews.
Benny Andrews. And this guy on the far left, I know him, but I just can't think of his name right now.
Right.
But I just, read about him recently. There's Rick Mayhew.
Right, the mustache with the light colored suit.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
And somebody in the
this is Jack White. I mean, and I'm just seeing this for the first time.
With the glasses?
This is Jack White on the very end to the left of the photo.
Oh, yes, very on the left with the white shirt.
Exactly.
Okay. And someone noted Akosia Barthwell Evans right in the center. She's one of our board members.
That's that
Gwendolyn Knight.
Gwendolyn Knight, of course, Bearden, Herb Gentry.
Who was some of the women in the background behind Gwendolyn?
And there's Joe. I don't really know.
Okay.
Yeah.
But this is great history here, and we should revisit that at some point. And
it's a wonderful photo, and that show, just drew so many, as you can see, artists to the show. In addition to other Blacks, it was as I say, the first, because there weren't many shows actually, and then the few that you went to, that there were very few Blacks there.
Yes. Yes.
So this was quite an amazing, and I even ran by one of the board members. So I asked a friend of mine, Diane, I said, I think some Blacks should be there. Let's go and crash this party.
That's wonderful.
Yes,
and so
yes.
When did you start collecting or dealing with Romaire's work? Let's show the next slide. We have a couple of slides.
This next piece is young students, which is one of my favorites. Oh, that's a photograph. Yes, I forgot about this photograph. This is great.
And, let's pay tribute to Sam Gilliam, another
Yes.
great artist who just left us.
Mhm.
And at this is an opening at a Sam Gilliam show.
Oh, wow. Do you remember the year?
Sam Gilliam, I don't remember the year, but it was in Soho. It was in the 70s. That's Herb Gentry on the far right. You only see part of his face. And then behind Herb is Sam. And Sam is the only one dressed. You see, he has a jacket, a vest.
Oh, yes, I see him. Yes.
Open, a shirt that's open at the neck.
Yes.
It was his show.
Okay. And do you know who took this photograph?
I have no idea.
Okay. See, this is the kind of work that our
Yes.
archivist at WPI is having me do, go through photographs and try to name people.
Today,
So
yes.
we'll have to
And
get
then
you to do
let's
some
go
of that.
Overstreet between myself and
There
Romy.
we go, with the hat, with the light colored hat. Okay,
Yes,
that's
yes.
helpful.
And actually, how I met Bearden was really interesting. The guy that I dated at the time, he embraced art. He really enjoyed what I was attempting to do. Not only was he, but he gravitated to art. And he couldn't understand. I mean, and we went to openings, Cordier Ekstrom openings of Bearden exhibits. So he said, why don't you call Bearden? I just, I mean, he's a great man. What is, he doesn't have time for me. And he already, you know what I mean? He persisted. His friend Rowan, he persisted. Finally, I mean, it's not even exists anymore. One Saturday, he said, "Here's the telephone book. Call Bearden now." And he was listed. He was listed in the telephone book. And I introduced myself.
Wait, so he picked up the phone or did Nanette?
He picked up the phone.
Okay.
Picked up the phone.
All right.
And, I introduced myself, told him that I was interested in art and I was trying to promote art. And he says, "Come on down. When would you like to come down?" And my friend Rowan was interested in buying works. So he ended up buying 2 or 3 works. And, I said, "Gee, here, I'm busy talking." And I didn't even think of looking at something.
Well, good thing that you went on down, because think about the story of August Wilson, the playwright. He tells the sad story of just not having the nerve going all the way up to 357 Canal and
right.
seeing the Bearden buzzer and chickening out, and then he passed away.
I never would have called him without my friend persisting and saying, "Here's the call him now." And he did the same thing with Norman Lewis too. But and he was, so warm, Bearden, so warm, interested in what I was attempting to do. But that's where I brought young students. I think I purchased a painting, a collage before young students. And when I brought it home, I realized I wasn't so crazy about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I called him and asked if I could exchange it for something else.
Oh.
He said, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And that began he would invite me to lunch to meet with some of the other artists. I met Herb Gentry through Bearden, Al Murray, who was a writer.
Bearden's good friend. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was, and then as I said, later on, he it was a small job, but just to be among the artists, which is what I wanted. But he made all of this possible.
Mm-hmm. And I want to show another picture. What's next? I wanted to just note that these are portraits of Bearden by
Various, even like Frank Stewart. Frank Stewart was a good
Frank Stewart
friend.
did a lot of
He was
photographs. I
always
think this is
there.
a Barboza.
And Barboza,
Mhm,
yes,
and Anthony Barboza.
right.
And this is in Bearden's studio down at 357 Canal.
That's right.
And he's
Yes,
working
and that
on a
mother and
piece.
child.
Yes, yes.
I have one of those pieces.
And
that's
here's young students.
young
I just love this piece.
Well, did you know that? And it wasn't until there was a show at the Studio Museum, a Bearden show called Memory and Metaphor.
Yeah, yeah.
And they borrowed young students for the show, and they hung it next to a work that's owned by the Museum of Modern Art called The Dove.
Oh, yes. Mhm.
Very similar. Some of the same figures are in that
1964.
collage as well. Mhm.
1964.
Yes.
But this is a beautiful work in 1968.
I had for
And
many years and just, sold it a few years ago.
And our next slide, let's just see a couple others.
Well, I have the silk screen, but I also own the collage that I purchased directly from Bearden. And it's my very, very favorite one. I mean, the background is abstract. The front, the hands almost looks like maybe he took something, I think, from who's the well-known painting at the Louvre.
Oh, say that again.
I can't.
Like the Mona Lisa?
Painting the Mona Lisa. I think those hands remind me of Mona Lisa, but it is, I feel it's extraordinary. And it's my most treasured work by Romy.
Thank you. The Burning of Troy.
And one of the things, this is a silk screen that I forgot that I had. It was just recently that it was discovered. But Romy was he was a knowledgeable person about so many,
Yes.
So he was very familiar with Greeks. So many of his books had to do with philosophy. And he did a whole series called the Odysseus series.
Yes.
And this is from that period.
That's based on Homer, Odyssey. Yes. Yes. All right, I think we have one more.
And then this one is Sunrise Garden, one of the, another thing I try to get across to people, but it's sometimes difficult for me because they say, oh, she just wants to sell something. So, they may not take me seriously, but if you like something, forget about maybe you cannot, go to the bank and write a check immediately. Pay in installments. This is a work that I saw when we had the Black Art Fairs at the Puck Building. And I purchased this from a dealer based in North Carolina. I can't remember how, but it was, far more than what I could afford, but it was by Bearden and I loved it. I loved the colors. And one person once said, a dealer, Serge Sabarsky, who collaborated, well, he was the dealer for Robert Lauder, who now, they both of them created the Neue Gallery, 86th Street. It was a museum on 86th and 5th Avenue. But I went to a series of lectures. I didn't know, he turned out to be Serge Sabarsky. one of the things Serge Sabarsky said, you should buy what you can least afford.
Yeah.
And, let that sink in, because, you may set aside a certain amount, let's say $10,000. I mean, that's $10,000. You want to buy maybe a few things, and you see something, and I always take that 10,000 and put it on one piece.
The best piece, right?
Best piece. And you may see something, it's 15,000.
Yeah.
You love it, but you have decided to, whatever, to just compromise and get something for that, the 10,000 you set aside.
Mhm.
I say, and Serge Sabarsky says the same thing, go buy what you like. I never talk with people about art being an investment. Now, in some cases, some of the artists are investments, but years ago,
Mhm.
it's really basically what appeals to you. And only the individual knows that. I mean, what I tried to do was have artists who I thought were worthy of consideration. And once people selected something based on what they liked, they understood what it was all about.
Right, and it must have meant a lot to you over the years selling work of artists that you actually knew and loved, right?
Yes, I mean,
yeah.
like Ed Clark asked to have a show because at the time he was handled by at one point a U gallery. I can't think of the first name right now, but his clients were white, and he asked to have a show. He said, I just want to see if Blacks like my work. He said, if they don't, it's fine, but I need to know. So it was it was a wonderful show. I learned so much from Ed Clark, who turned out to have worked, he and Chris Shelton, who were good friends, worked at Sidney Janis Gallery. Sidney Janis, it's a small circle. Sidney Janis was the very good friend of the woman I babysat for.
Oh.
And isn't that amazing? So all of the things that she had on her wall, she had gotten through
that
Sidney
gallery.
Janis.
That's crazy. That's a crazy.
Yes, yeah.
So Peg, I'm gonna have to this is such a wonderful conversation, but I do have to bring some of our folks on. We're getting so many nice little comments about how nice it is to have you on and to hear your stories. And someone says, thank you for your extraordinary gift of knowledge. And of course, one of the questions that are always on my mind and on our audience's mind is, what advice you would have. There's one person who I think is an artist who is asking whether or not you would want to look at her work. So she's got a commission, I believe, and she's wondering if you'll take a look at it. So what do you say to artists like that who want to send you their work or want to get advice?
I asked them to send me images. I'm always looking at new work. And if I can give advice, I do. But yes, so, please send to Peg Alston at gmail.com.
Okay, there you have it. That's wonderful. And we want to also thank your assistant who is on the chat answering some questions. Also, Mia. Did I say that right, Mia?
Yes, Mia.
Yes.
It's
so
very
thank
important
you. We have some folks
in promoting.
Okay, I'm sorry for that delay. I was speaking over you. We have someone tuning in from London in the UK. Audrey and Brian, I don't know if you know them.
But one of the other questions, now you said that you give advice to artists, you give advice to collectors as well. True?
Well, we know basically when you say collectors, telling them to go by what they like. Now we're in a field where there's so many African-American artists and African artists in every gallery now. Frankly, I don't think they feel relevant unless they have at least one Black gallery, in their stable.
One Black artist in their stable, yeah.
At least one. And often people follow the names of the artists. It's Basquiat or this one, who's just top artists. Like a fancy car or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you like a particular artist's work, I say select something again that appeals to you. I say don't buy the name, buy the art.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even when I have shows, I select for the most part the art for the exhibit, because there's some things that I may not appeal to me, and I have to go by what appeals to me first. It's very difficult, and I wouldn't want to sell something that I didn't like,
right,
to someone else.
And one of the questions we had was this, so this might be a good time to answer this, is how do you determine the artists that are important?
Yes, what I look for is a style. Has the artist arrived at a style that is theirs? I mean, it's okay to be influenced by other artists, but then it's up to you, should take it to another level. I mean, I'm talking about the artists, and develop something that is unique, a new language. And when I see artists who one work looks like something, another work looks like someone else, and I realize that they haven't arrived at what they may not know that, it's their own language, which will help them and really help them to move in their career, because galleries are not interested in, let's say, take Bearden for instance. We already have a Bearden. We already have his style. So why copy him? It's difficult and because I'm not an artist, but I know it's a very, very difficult trade, but you have to work at it. If you want to make, you have to work at it very hard.
Okay, we have two more questions, so we're going to go. I'm going to say them both, and then maybe you can fold them in together. I don't know if that's possible. Have your methods of art dealing changed over the years? And should artists frame their work, or do galleries do this for them now?
Well, artists often frame their works if they can, but they're generally frames that may not complement the work. So usually if someone buys something, I suggest that they have it reframed, in the best, to frame it in the best possible way. And what was the other question?
Have your methods of art dealing changed over the years?
Not at all.
Meeting strategies that stand out?
I always wanted my name to be synonymous with fine art. Years ago, it may have been very much easier to sell anything that, based on price. based on what I thought would appeal to a Black family, individual, but that's not me. As again, I said, I look for the artists who are painting from their gut. Norman Lewis, he did have a gallery but they never had a show of his, but he painted what pleased him. His style was what pleased him. And he continued to work regardless of not having shows to plan for, exhibits to plan for. So I prefer, for me, to handle artists whose works I like. They may be struggling. And I try to help them the best way. But there's a truth that comes from a person when they are putting out what they feel. And like Norman Lewis, you see, I mean, his masterpieces. He wasn't trying to please anyone else but himself, but he needed to get it out. It's almost like writing a song, and we have now with so many artists, so many beautiful songs. And I always, with my collection, I knew who I wanted in my collection. I was always looking at new artists, and this is just a delight for me to be working at what I love.
Yeah, I wonder, somebody was asking, who asked that question about your methods, like, are there ways of introducing and educating buyers versus the strategies of just trying to stand out in a crowded gallery landscape? Like, what kind of advice would you have for someone who wanted to start a gallery now?
That's very, it depends on what it is you want. It's very hard to start a gallery. This is why I'm a private dealer, because another thing Serge Sabarsky said, in starting a gallery, you should have enough capital to operate for 5 years without making a profit from a sale. Now, that's a lot of money.
That's wow.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so once Bearden took me to OK Harris Gallery that was closing and moving somewhere else. It was in West Broadway. Space was large, but I knew that we didn't have the market yet to sustain a gallery. So before you think about that, think about sustainability. If there's a style, I belong to the Private Art Dealers Association and now the American Art Dealers Association. And each of them has their own particular group of artists that they are representing or in their stable. So is there, like, like some people may want self-taught artists or surrealistic art.
Mm-hmm.
So there are many different styles. So you have to think about what it is, what you want to represent. If it's something that's very important to you, you have to focus on that. It's better that way than just to open up a space and have any and everything.
Thank you. On that note, I think we do have to close. Someone asked, could you please state the email address again?
Okay, it's Peg Alston, and I want to say, I want to quote something.
Yes.
PegAlston@gmail.com. There's a poem that I love by Rudyard Kipling titled If. And there are a couple of lines that remind, Bearden, if you can walk with kings, yet keep your common touch. That was Bearden. Bearden
wonderful.
was just a very special person. And actually, every serious collection should include a work by this artist.
All right. We are working towards that.
Okay.
We are working every day. We know our work is not done yet.
But
Peg.
you're doing, it's, he deserves to be, on the highest pedestal because he contributed, so he didn't have to, so much to art. I mean, his art, but then he helped so
His
many
friendship,
people,
yes, his friendship.
through Spiral, and he was, those checks from Cinque were signed by him.
Yes, yes, yes.
An amazing, generous person and a great, great artist.
Thank you so much, Peg Alston, from
Welcome,
everyone who's
Lisa.
on. I know that they've enjoyed this conversation as much as I have. Maybe they didn't enjoy it half as much as I actually did. But I did promise that this is maybe the first of a few hours we need to have with you to sit down and speak. And I just want to...
It's been my pleasure.
All right, I just want to thank everyone for attending. You've been a wonderful audiences. We're getting lots of claps and fabulous things in the chat. We'll make sure that Peg gets to read those. I just want to thank Joanne and Ron, and especially to Nadal, our producer here, and Harlem One Stop. And this will be presented on Harlem One Stop's YouTube page, so you can see the recording in a couple of days, I believe. So thank you again, and from the bottom of my heart to the bottom of yours, please join us again.
And Joanne, thank you so
Thank
much.
you, Peg. This has been wonderful. Good night.